I'd played in local bands before that, and then I got into Ozzy and just thrust right away into playing arenas. One of the first gigs I did with him.
I'd played in local bands before that, and then I got into Ozzy and was just thrust right away into playing arenas, Jake E. Lee once said. But despite stepping into one of rock's biggest stages, Jake E. Lee has never been a name often mentioned in the chronicles of heavy metal. He didn't smash guitars on stage, never made headlines for bar fights, and never boasted about millions of views. Yet, he was the man who wrote Bark at the Moon, the very song that brought Ozzy Osbourne back to the top after Randy Rhodes's tragic death. And he was also the one whose name was quietly removed from the songwriting credits, vanishing from the spotlight without a single word of complaint. Jake never lived for titles or fame. He didn't need the limelight to prove how good he was. The only things he carried through his more than 40-year journey were his guitar and a fearless silence. While the world chased attention, Jake chose to stand behind the curtain. While others screamed to be heard, he simply played and let his guitar do the talking. So what made a gifted artist like Jake E. Lee, once described as the bridge between Randy Rhoads and Zakk Wylde, disappear in silence for decades? Why is someone who helped shape the very sound of a pivotal era in Ozzy's career so often missing from the list of legendary guitarists? The answer lies in his quiet but turbulent life, a life where the spotlight never quite managed to hide the scars behind it. Jake E. Lee was born on February 15, 1957, in Norfolk, Virginia, under the birth name Jake Lou Williams. His mother was Japanese, and his father was of Welsh descent, a rare combination in an America still rife with prejudice. The family later moved to San Diego, where Jake's early years unfolded in silence, caught between two worlds he never truly belonged to. At school, he was teased for his Asian features, his narrow eyes and distinct complexion. He once said he always felt out of place, not American enough to be accepted, and not Japanese enough to understand his mother's roots. Withdrawn and introspective, Jake found comfort in music. His mother, a strict and principled woman, forced him to study classical piano from the age of 6. Forbidden from listening to rock music, Jake spent years practicing piano for hours each day, building a foundation of discipline and melodic understanding. But by age 13, he secretly switched to guitar, not out of rebellion, but because it gave him the freedom the piano never could. He started listening to Led Zeppelin, Jimi Hendrix, and Ritchie Blackmore, artists banned in his home. He didn't ask for permission, he just listened and played. Music became his escape, his voice, and his weapon. He never rebelled with words or dramatic acts. He chose music and silence. Those years of discipline and isolation would shape the very core of Jake E. Lee, quiet, unbound, and unlike anyone else. Jake didn't enter the rock world with a bang. There was no viral demo or million-dollar contract. His career began as quietly as the man himself. After mastering the guitar, he played in several local San Diego bands, treating each as a stepping stone. By the late 1970s, he moved to Los Angeles, the city where every young guitarist chased their dreams. But LA was brutal. With hundreds of bands and thousands of guitarists fighting for attention, Jake found gigs with Teaser and later Mickey Rat, which would evolve into Rat. These experiences sharpened his stage presence and gave him access to the underground Sunset Strip scene where legends like George Lynch and Eddie Van Halen had carved their names. Eventually, Jake joined Rough Cut, a band managed by Wendy Dio, wife of Ronnie James Dio. This became a turning point. Wendy introduced Jake to Sharon Osbourne at a time when Ozzy was searching for someone to replace the late Randy Rhoads. Jake was invited to audition against George Lynch. Ozzy later admitted he was torn. Both were great, but during one rehearsal, Jake improvised a riff that made Ozzy turn to Sharon and say, "This guy's crazy and I like it." Jake got the gig not because of fame, but because of his quiet boldness, his ability to push the guitar to its limits while maintaining control. That was what Ozzy needed after Randy's death. So, from the shadows of local clubs, Jake E. Lee stepped into the center of heavy metal, where every spotlight burned bright and every mistake was magnified. But Jake didn't flinch. No drama, no fake excitement, just a quiet grip on his guitar, ready to write the most brilliant chapter of his career. Tragically, his name would be erased from that chapter. In 1983, Bark at the Moon was released, marking Jake's official debut with Ozzy. The album's sound took a sharp, modern turn. Jake's influence was unmistakable, from the relentless rhythms to the soaring solos. Yet only Ozzy's name appeared on the songwriting credits. Jake had written the title track and the album's most iconic riffs, ideas he had been developing since his Rough Cut days. When asked why he wasn't credited, Jake said bluntly, "They handed me the contract. Sharon said if I didn't sign it, I'd be out of a job." He signed it, stripped of all songwriting rights, royalties, and recognition. For decades afterward, Bark at the Moon would be known as Ozzy's creation, even though much of its soul came from the quiet guitarist behind him. Still, Jake didn't give up. He went on to record The Ultimate Sin in 1986, an album that leaned into glam metal. The track, Shot in the Dark, became a hit, the video played non-stop on MTV, and the tour sold out worldwide. On stage, Jake's playing spoke for him, precise, sharp, and soulful. He wasn't a Randy Rhoads clone, nor did he wield Zakk Wylde's bravado. Jake played like someone who had been hurt, no wasted notes, no theatrics, just emotion in every string. But then came another blow. After the tour, Jake found out he had been fired, not by phone, not face-to-face, but by reading the news. No warning. The headlines simply announced that Zakk Wylde was the new guitarist for Ozzy Osbourne. Once again, Jake was out, erased quietly, without explanation. And again, the hand behind the silence was Sharon Osbourne, the same person who had once convinced him to sign away his rights. After the lawsuit, Jake E. Lee left the spotlight just as he had entered it, quietly. But behind that silence lay a deep scar, not from losing his position, but from the reality that the sweat, passion, and years he poured into music were never truly acknowledged. Yet Jake didn't let bitterness consume him. Instead of clinging to a big name, he chose to start over from scratch, forming his own band, Badlands. It wasn't a safe move, but for Jake, it was the only path left to preserve the one thing the ruthless rock industry hadn't taken, his dignity. Setbacks became silent blows that slowly killed belief. After parting ways with Ozzy Osbourne's band, Jake didn't vanish entirely. In 1988, he formed Badlands, a classic hard rock outfit built on raw power and pure intent. The lineup included the fiery vocals of Ray Gillen, former singer for Black Sabbath, drummer Eric Singer, who would later rise to fame with Kiss, and bassist Greg Chison. Jake poured all of his trust into this new venture. No more contracts, no more constraints, just music in its most unfiltered form. Their self-titled debut album Badlands, 1989, received widespread acclaim. Rather than bow to the glam metal trends ruling MTV, they delivered a sound thick with blues-infused rock, reminiscent of Physical Graffiti-era Led Zeppelin. Critics praised Jake's refined guitar work and Ray's powerful voice. But as the band found its voice, the grunge movement surged, leaving little space for honest, classically rooted rock bands. Their second album, Voodoo Highway, 1991, pushed their creativity further, but tensions began to rise. Ray clashed with other members, and record labels pressured Jake to shift their sound toward grunge trends. Jake refused. He wasn't interested in mimicking Soundgarden or Alice in Chains. If artistic integrity meant losing sales, then so be it. Then came the hardest blow. Ray Gillen, his bandmate and friend, the voice behind lyrics Jake had written from the heart, was diagnosed with AIDS. As Ray's condition worsened, he could no longer tour or record. In December 1993, he passed away at just 34. Jake made no public statement. He granted no interviews. But those close to him said he was shattered, not only by the loss of a friend, but by the loss of the last shred of hope that a band could survive on nothing but music. After Ray's death, Jake disappeared from the music scene. He declined collaborations, refused interviews, and released no albums for nearly a decade. No shows, no festivals. Rumors swirled, he'd retired, sunk into depression, taken a regular job. No one knew, because Jake never explained. He just vanished. In 1996, he quietly released an instrumental solo album, A Fine Pink Mist, with no promotion, like a private letter to the few who still remembered him. Then came Retraced in 2005, followed again by silence. Then, in 2024, his name surfaced again, not for a comeback, but for tragedy. Jake E. Lee had been shot multiple times while walking his dog near his Las Vegas home. The motive remains unknown. He suffered serious injuries to his arm, leg, and back, but, miraculously, none were fatal. When asked afterward if he felt anger, Jake simply said, "I've been shot many times in life. This was just the first with a real gun." No outburst. No fury. Just Jake, absorbing life's cruelty with the same haunting quietness that had come to define him. And maybe, it's that very silence that speaks louder than any scream ever could. In a world where artists document every meal on Instagram, Jake remained a shadow. No selfies with celebrities, no updates on relationships. He never married, had no children, and never shared his private life with the world. To some, that may seem lonely. To Jake, it was peace. He once lived in a modest home on the outskirts of Las Vegas. No fans outside, no cameras, just his dogs and a wall of aging amplifiers. "I don't like crowds. I'm not cut out for this industry networking thing. I just want to live," he said in a rare early 2000s interview. Fans and fellow musicians have often mourned his absence from the spotlight, but Jake never looked back. After betrayals in the music industry, being erased by Ozzy, being fired without a word, he learned to maintain distance. His silence wasn't weakness. It was armor. While rumors of addiction and bankruptcy floated around, the truth was simpler. Jake was fine. He kept writing, kept playing, just never told the world. To him, true music echoed in quiet rooms at 2 a.m., when no one was listening or judging. And if there was one constant love in Jake's life, it was the guitar. He cared for his instruments like others care for a spouse, cleaning, adjusting, restringing them on schedule. One guitar he's kept for over 30 years, despite cracked wood and peeling paint. Never sold, never traded. Just like him, aged out of fashion but never unfaithful to himself. Perhaps for Jake, love was never about one woman. It was love for freedom, for silence, for music untouched by marketing trends. He didn't live alone because no one needed him, but because the only thing he truly needed was something the world couldn't offer: silence. If you only look at record sales or the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, you might miss Jake E. Lee entirely. No multi-platinum solo albums, no star on Hollywood Boulevard. No guitar company made him their brand face. But among the guitar community, Jake is revered, not because of fame, but for honesty. Artists from John 5 to Dimebag Darrell, from Nuno Bettencourt to Zakk Wylde, have all pointed to Jake's unique ability to blend emotion, technique, and melody in a way no one else could. He didn't shred for attention. He didn't race across the fretboard to impress. Each riff was like a story, with a beginning, a climax, and an ending that left listeners stunned. Bark at the Moon, even though his name was erased from the songwriting credits, remains one of the most vivid testaments to his genius. The soaring, theatrical solos brought a completely new flavor to Ozzy's sound. Even without credit, real fans know, Jake was the soul of that album. With Badlands, he revealed another side of himself, not just a guitarist, but a composer and leader. Though overshadowed by the grunge explosion, Badlands is now regarded as one of the most underrated bands of the 80s and 90s. Their debut has even been favorably compared to Led Zeppelin IV. In the end, Jake E. Lee may not be a household name, but for those who truly listen, his legacy speaks volumes, in silence, in soul, and in 6 strings. Badlands has often been compared to iconic records like Appetite for Destruction for its structure and emotional depth. Yet unlike those legendary albums, Badlands never had the chance to become truly iconic, because they were forgotten before they were fully understood, much like Jake E. Lee himself. The sad truth is that much of Jake's contribution to rock history has been quietly rewritten. On Wikipedia, his name is often just a footnote among Ozzy Osbourne's many guitarists. At reunion shows, he's often absent. But even in his absence, Jake's sound echoes, in the phrasing of new generations of guitarists, in how they control melody, and in the unspoken truth that no one played quite like him, and no one ever will. Jake E. Lee is living proof that you don't need awards to leave a mark. You don't need to be called a legend to be embedded in the DNA of an entire genre. He doesn't have a statue, but his influence lives on, quietly spreading through every recording, every riff, like the softest voice in a room that makes everyone fall silent and listen. After years of quiet seclusion, Jake faced a life-altering moment in October 2024. While walking his dog near his home in Las Vegas in the early morning hours, he was shot 3 times, once in the arm, once in the leg, and once in the back. The bullet to his back fractured a rib and damaged a lung. Miraculously, none of the bullets struck any vital organs, and Jake was rushed to intensive care in a conscious state. Following his recovery, Jake revealed that the shooting occurred after he tried to stop 2 thieves from stealing a neighbor's motorcycle. Though he attempted to de-escalate the situation with words, it escalated into gunfire. Now in rehabilitation, Jake has slowly begun playing guitar again and expressed his intention to finally complete the long-delayed Patina tour with his band, Red Dragon Cartel, a tour postponed due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Although he was previously diagnosed with carpal tunnel syndrome, further examination revealed it to be cartilage loss in his right hand. Rather than undergo surgery, Jake adapted, learning to play using more elbow movement and managing the pain in his own way. Despite every setback, Jake E. Lee remains optimistic and deeply connected to music. He continues to create and perform, proving that true passion never fades, it endures. Jake was never the victor in the race for fame. He was erased from songwriting credits, fired at his peak, watched his most heartfelt band fall apart, and lost a musical soulmate far too soon. Yet through all of this, one thing remained intact: his identity. He was never the biggest name, but he was among the most authentic. While others chased trends, Jake stepped back when he could no longer be himself. While others boasted of their accolades, he let his guitar do the talking. And while noise dominated the airwaves, he crafted melodies powerful enough to survive in silence. Jake E. Lee's life proves that not everyone standing in the spotlight is truly shining. Sometimes, real light comes from the shadows, from someone quietly keeping the flame alive, not for fame, not for money, but because life without music simply isn't life. After everything, childhood isolation, a forgotten career, and even a shooting that could have ended it all, Jake came back. With a wounded hand, he picked up his guitar once again, refusing surgery and choosing pain over silence. Because to Jake, music is not a job. It's survival. There may never be a statue bearing his name, but every time Bark at the Moon plays, every time a young guitarist tries to blend speed with feeling or technique with soul, Jake E. Lee is still there. Not in the spotlight, not on stage, but in the heart of one listener who truly understands. Which era of Jake E. Lee left the strongest impression on you? His blazing years with Ozzy, or the soul-stirring riffs of Badlands? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you're moved by stories of artists who don't need the spotlight to leave behind light, don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring the bell so you never miss the next powerful journey. Thank you for watching all the way.